Crisostomo Suarez.
I'm going to start us off with a question. How many of you guys here consider yourself to be part of a minority or some marginalized community? Can I raise a hand? Yeah, a few of you. There's a kind of coolness to be part of a marginalized group, right? Let me explain. Let's ignore all the obvious obstacles and hardships for a second. I mean, you get some cool holidays, sometimes even a month every now and then. Shout out to September. And we all love the frequent Instagram posts that promote our culture as diverse and not something terrible or alien for once. And as a first-generation Hispanic American myself, this is always comforting to see. But there's a problem that comes with people like me, specifically those first-generation people of color. And that is the dreaded fear of becoming more white. Let me explain. We can all agree here that our county, Putnam County, is predominantly white, correct? Via the latest census data I could find, it's around 91%. If I could provide an analogy, our county is akin to a sandwich, where each of the towns is a piece of Wonder Bread. And all of those said towns are glued by nothing but mayonnaise. I don't know, there's like some peanut butter in there somewhere. That's me. I know this to be true. I've gone to Brewster since I was in kindergarten all the way through to my senior year. And unless you're one to knock out through the village, which for those unacquainted has garnered the nickname Brewster Rico with the Urban Dictionary definition, which I'm not sure whether to classify as satire or just racist. Unless you're one to knock out through there, you'll find the county and the town filled to the brim with caucasity. And that's not to come across as an attack, but what I find so difficult to comprehend is I find myself to be in an oxymoronic situation when it comes to my identity. For one, I am very much Hispanic. I grew up speaking Spanish, I understand it as best as I can. I grew up in that aforementioned village. I grew up watching these classic shows, El Chavo del Ocho, Saldo Gigante, Caso Cerrado. And I do get a homely feeling whenever I hear a song like Prince Royce's cover of Stand By Me, playing as a family gathering that I really want to know business being a part of in the first place. But despite this, as recently as a couple weeks ago actually, I had someone tell me over the phone, Pablo, you sound like a white person. And I was like, okay, I hang around predominantly white people, likely their tone of voice influences mine to some degree. But it's gotten to the point where there will be times where I'll be sitting around and I'll remember, wait a minute, I'm not white, but I am Hispanic. But from the way I currently present myself, I don't feel comfortable entirely identifying with that label. I wasn't sure if this is a common experience or not, so I decided to delve deeper into the psychology of myself as a first-generation American. And in order to do that, we need to understand the context under which immigrants came to this country in the first place. Now, for context, Putnam's whiteness isn't exclusive or anything. It's actually pretty representative of America's greater dominant ethnic group, that being the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. And this is the basis for the whole melting pot theory, the idea that those who come into this country should assimilate and depart all of their cultures and all of their cultural identifiers when they come in. And initially, when the population is predominantly white and the immigrants coming in are predominantly white, this is easy enough as they're able to essentially blend in without a trace. However, once we start getting groups of non-Western, non-white immigrants coming into the country, this becomes much more difficult to achieve, as not only do they have to overcome much more significant cultural, non-Western cultural differences that differentiate them so as not to be ostracized by the great American public, but they also have to compensate considering they have much more distinct physical differences as well. And these processes, like assimilation, they can result in what we call internalized oppression, which is where individuals and groups start to hate amongst themselves as they receive negative messages, negative input, and then internalize those messages as truth over time. And processes like assimilation are a perfect example of things that perpetuate stereotypes towards those who don't conform to the norm. And this results in true oppressors, the dominant ethnic group in this case, gaining more power as people learn to hate amongst themselves, as they subconsciously view this larger dominant group as the superior one, an ideal group. And as a first generation American myself, I can admit this has put me in a bit of an uniquely uncomfortable situation. I mean, for one, I am American, but I'm not American. because I am brown. And any of you guys can contest it as much as you want, but when I put the word American into any of your heads, you'd be lying to me if you told me that someone who looks anything like me comes into your head. And I grew up as if my family were still in Guatemala or the Dominican Republic, not just in terms of cultural, and not just in terms of speaking Spanish and understanding Spanish, but in terms of my cultural values as well. In comparison to the more American, individualistic centric way of thinking, Latino culture is definitely much more focused on community and family and helping one another. There's a split in the media I consumed as well. For as nostalgic as a show like Wizards of Waverly Place or Ben 10 might have been for me growing up, it will never give me the same familiarity that any of the works of Mexican comedian Chespirito did. And despite this, I still don't completely feel comfortable identifying as Latino, considering I speak English 99% of the time. When I'm at home, I speak English with my friends, I speak with my siblings, I speak it at school, and I think in English. And I hang out, like I said, with a predominantly white people. The fellow first-generation American, Mimi Cordia, said the following. They are talking about how being a first-generation American, the dual-sidedness strengthens you and gives you more range and versatility. And whilst I do concur a bit with this statement, I can't help but feel that this doesn't necessarily alleviate, the dual-sidedness doesn't necessarily alleviate any of the pressures that I feel to go toward one side or the other. I can admit that in 99% of context, I am going toward that American side. I'm not going towards this homely comfortability that I'm used to. There's so many factors that have pressured me to go toward that side. Always being in class growing up, feeling as like that one of the Hispanic kids, or being the minority, especially as a group caricatured by poverty and dirtiness. And in the process, I've definitely come to subconsciously associate any negative interfamilial experiences that I have with being Hispanic. I'd be like, in my head, this would be so much easier if I wasn't Hispanic. If I was white, this would be so much easier. Things like difficulties I have when I have secondhand embarrassment with my mom when she couldn't speak English at a reception desk, or any domestic turmoil. I just would wish I would be so much better if my family were just normal. So what do us first generations do about this exactly? That's the question. I mean, do we just let our culture dilute until there's nothing left, until we've all assimilated into one big, true American culture? I hope not. I think that at some point we could hopefully adopt a form of cultural pluralism where all our cultures exist coinciding, parallel to one another, and contributing to an overarching American culture. And what does this mean for people like me to do now? It just means to embrace your culture as much as possible. Speak the language whenever you can. Speak it as much as possible. Ask your parents about, familial traditions, things you're not know about. I mean, I have like 30 cousins probably that I'm not aware of. I know so many names, I don't know faces. I should probably ask about that soon. And don't be afraid to show it around people like your friends and your family, whether that means doing, flexing your Spanish, or just calling someone like Anthony Ayala, Pinche Bendejo from time to time. Or you could do what I'm about to do right now, and you could act as if you're my father at a family gathering. He was indefinitely inebriated, as if he's Henry Bloss at a football game. And I need all this. Yo, you three, Roberto, you know this, bro. Come on. Woo!